Let's get more on this now with Martha Raddatz, ABC's Chief Global Affairs Correspondent, Dan Senor, co-founder of the Foreign Policy Initiative, and Richard Haass, president of the Council on Foreign Relations, also author of a new book, Foreign Policy Begins at Home. And Richard, let me begin with you, because you put out a pretty powerful tweet this morning saying that by releasing Snowden, China has thrown away the chance to invest in relations with the United States.
Well, here this is, George, just a couple of weeks after this summit where China talked about a win-win relationship to be a model of relations between major powers of the day. And instead, they've gone for a short-term gain. Plus, it raises real questions whether China is prepared to enter into any sort of regulation of what could be the great area of international competition for the next couple of decades.
So you have no doubt that this was the government of China telling Hong Kong.
There's not a lot of freelancing going on in China. The idea that the Hong Kong authorities did this independently, this to me, inconceivable.
You agree that this complicates the relationship?
I think it complicates it, but I certainly don't think it ends it. I don't think it's quite that serious. I think China will move on. Hong Kong will move on. What were they really supposed to do? They have domestic politics as well, especially in Hong Kong. Snowden had created protests in that country. So I think, in effect, China really had to say, let's get rid of this guy. Let's get rid of the problem. He might be here for months and months and months, and that would really complicate things.
Clearly, though, Dan, this is also something the United States does every day as well. They're working in China as well.
Right. And Snowden's, interviews that he gave and documents he released to the Chinese press obviously puts us in a very uncomfortable position. But I think domestically in the U.S., I think this further strengthens the center on national security. I think there was a real risk over the last couple of weeks that there would be this left-right coalition that would backlash against the United States government, sort of libertarian uprising. And I think Snowden, just traveling around the world, flying to these anti-American capitals, behaving the way he's doing, further strengthens. I think the center is holding right now in the U.S., and I think that's a positive development.
How about the great irony here that he's complaining about the United States and all these things the United States is doing wrong, and he might end up in Venezuela? Good luck, pal.
Right.
But one of the stunning things from we just heard from General Alexander, Richard, is that, he conceded, yeah, those alarm bells didn't go off. And I think a lot of people shake their head and go, how could this possibly happen? A fairly low-level guy in Hawaii gets our top secrets.
But what the general also said is true. We've got this system that depends upon millions of people, some full-time in uniform, some full-time civilians, some contractors. And there's always going to be a couple of weak links, and we're vulnerable to that, and there's no way to ensure the security when you've got all these individuals, particularly so many people in the tech world, as Dan said, come at it with this libertarian ethic that big government is bad, individual privacy is paramount no matter what. But the fact that, look, so many people in media and elsewhere call this guy a whistleblower. He's not a whistleblower, he's a felon. He has endangered the lives of Americans. And I think this story is beginning to turn, and that's important.
And the majority of Americans, as you point, I do believe he should be prosecuted. Martha, I want to turn now. You're just back from Jordan, and we're learning where the United States has been in a training exercise for possible military operations in Syria, some kind of military intervention in Syria. It does seem pretty clear right now that the U.S. is committed to helping the rebels in a way that levels the playing field with Assad's forces.
Well, I think what has been going on for a while is the CIA has been helping train the rebels on heavier weapons. I think you'll see much more of that. That's a way for America to actually vet those rebels. There's still some concern who they would give heavy weapons to. I don't think the United States is going to give those heavy weapons.
Qatar, Saudi Arabia.
Qatar, Saudi Arabia, but we'll help train them so you can look the rebels in the eye and say, these are the guys that we trust. It's as much as we can do at this point to try to change the balance there, because the small arms will really not change the balance in any way. And you've got such a huge problem, which I saw with the refugees, 500,000 in Jordan. That is unsustainable.
Question, Dan Senor, is it too late?
I don't think it's too late if we do more than just arming the rebels. The big question will be whether or not the administration at some point is prepared to do some sort of bombing campaign of Syrian airfields. It's the air landing strips that enable Assad's government to move chemical weapons around, move troops around, receive arms from Iran. Unless those airstrips are taken out, arming the rebels, I think, will have limited impact.
But if you go that far, Richard Haass, is there any way to limit our involvement once we begin trying to implement some kind of a no-fly zone or bomb the airfields?
That's why I don't think we should go that far. But what we should do is do the max, if you will, an indirect help. And that's why we should be providing these guys serious anti-armor, serious anti-aircraft support. But I don't think we want to go beyond that into direct military involvement. Syria is just one thing we've got to worry about. We've got a much bigger issue in the Middle East coming down the pike, which is Iran. Plus, we've got all sorts of issues in Asia with China. Plus, we've got the domestic challenges here at home. We do not want American foreign policy to be grabbed totally by events in Syria.
Well, I agree with that. The risk, however, is if the Iran, Hezbollah, Assad, Russia-backed proxy prevails, the kind of momentum and shot in the arm that will give to the regime in Tehran could give that ultimate fight that we're dealing with, that ultimate conflict, Iran, give the Iranians the upper hand.
That's why, again, we should be arming these guys much more heavily.
But I still don't know what comes next. I still want the question answered. What comes next? What's our strategy in Syria? If they start taking out airfields and that doesn't work, or if you arm the rebels with heavier weapons or train and assist or do anything and that doesn't work, then what happens?
I think what we have to be prepared for, no matter what we do, let's be honest and bleak about this. We're looking at years and years of prolonged fighting in Syria. There's not going to be a quick ending. There's not going to be a happy ending. Even after Assad may be ousted from power, then the rebels will turn on one another.
It'll never be the same
Dan,
there.
none of that is going to happen. And we saw the president with President Putin this week. None of that is going to happen unless the Russians change their attitude.
I agree, which is why we have to, at some point, move past the Russians. We have to understand that there's not going to be any peaceful transition of power, because it seems to me Putin's vetoed 3 UN Security Council resolutions on Syria. He's watered down many more. The idea that we're going to get cooperation from Putin is unrealistic. I think Richard is right in that we haven't had a real discussion in this country about the stakes in Syria. And the president, at some point, has to address this issue, because for all the things that Martha has just seen on the front lines, this becomes a real regional mess that someone needs to talk through the American public.
Martha, we only have 30 seconds left. I have not seen any indication from the president that he's willing to go out there in a big public way and make the case for intervention in Syria.
He doesn't want to, because once you put that giant toe in the water, he's in.
Okay, Martha, Richard, Dan, thank you all very much.